This week on LTC News, longer days may be ahead.
Whether or not we should consider going to what's in effect daylight savings time year-round.
Authoritarian moves in Cambodia.
A number of the independent media have been shut down.
Football and concussions.
In layman's terms, kind of wiggles your brain around inside your skull.
Stay with
and
us.
Causes damage.
Welcome to LTC News. I'm your news anchor, Alanna Flood. We know winter is coming when we turn back the clocks and find ourselves in the dark at 5 p.m. According to a commission formed at the State House, there is really no reason why we change the clocks at all. State Senator Brian Dorrington is on the commission that studied the pros and the cons of keeping our clocks steady.
The Time Zone Commission actually came out of the Economic Development Bill of 2016. It was a jobs bill, and that was one of the commissions, the only one actually, that was formed as a result of that much bigger and broader bill. And what we were tasked to do in the commission was to look at the question of whether or not we should consider going to what's in effect daylight savings time year-round. In other words, you wouldn't turn your clock back in the fall. You wouldn't spring ahead in the spring. And so as a result, there was an 11-member commission appointed. The governor appointed members, the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, the minority leaders in both the House and the Senate. So the 11 members came together, some of them elected officials, some from private industry, and had a series of hearings where we heard from and took in data on a number of areas that we were examining.
The commission explored how the proposal would affect transportation, education, public safety, public health, and the economy.
The Retail Association produced information from all of their members, basically saying that they see a drop in business, whether it's restaurants or the like, in those months from November to March. People don't go out and dine. People don't go out and shop. They come out of work or what have you, and it's dark and they just go home. We heard from people in the criminal crime area. There's an increase in street crime when there's that extra hour of darkness at the end of the day that you don't see in the morning hour, but you do see it at the end of the day. One of the biggest areas of concern had to do with kids going to school in the dark, because if we were to not fall back, not change our clock, it's going to be darker later in the morning, lighter at the end of the day, because obviously you don't get another hour of daylight. But what we heard from the experts on that had to do with the start of school time, whether or not we change the clocks. And there's a lot of research and data that says we're starting kids too early in the morning. We should be rolling that back by an hour. One of the recommendations was we should explore doing this only if there is a critical mass, only if other northeastern states, and perhaps including New York, do likewise. Two, we should only consider doing this if we do mandate a state law of school start times so that we roll those back later. And then three, and I think very importantly, that there be a concerted effort to have a public campaign, information campaign, so that the public understands, the public is in agreement, that there's buy-in from the public about doing this. And we've been amazed and overwhelmed by the amount of contact we've had from media outlets in other states. As far away as Mississippi are calling, Michigan. People have liked the fact that there's a conversation going on, so who knows? So I think it's just the start, not the end.
It's a long-term effort that might have some very positive outcomes. And now, Brian Dorrington, LTC Director of Municipal Programming, brings us his City Council Synopsis.
Hello and welcome to the City Council Synopsis for the meetings of November 7th and 14th, 2017. It being Election Day, the November 7th meeting was relatively short for obvious reasons. Unless you've been living under a sock, you've probably seen the election results already. In the sad case that you have been living under a sock, I will quickly provide you with the list of winners who will take office in January. Topping the ticket was challenger and former city councilor Vesna Noon. In second was incumbent Ed Kennedy. Third was incumbent John Leahy. Fourth was incumbent Bill Samaras. Fifth was incumbent Rita Mercier. Sixth was incumbent Jim Milanazzo. Seventh was incumbent Rodney Elliott. Eighth was challenger Karen Cirillo. And ninth was challenger David Conway. 61% of the voters voted to renovate the high school downtown, while 39% voted against the downtown renovation. The November 14th meeting started off with Councilor Samaras giving a report from the Economic Development Subcommittee, which occurred earlier in the night. Jim Cook of Lowell Development Finance Corporation presented the founders of 3 startups located in Lowell, all of which have received financial assistance from the LDFC. Victoria Thompson from Horsepower Technologies presented their product Fast Track, an orthotic that helps rehabilitate horses that suffer from lameness. Abhishek DeWild of In Vitro Metrics talked about her product, which recommends which treatment options are best for individuals with cancer based simply on their biopsy report. Lastly, Raja Abdazi and Ray Hamilton of Invisaware presented their wearable smart jewelry, which alerts authorities during an emergency. Numerous veterans spoke in favor to amend an ordinance that would increase the real estate tax exemption for veterans organizations to $1.5 million. The council voted unanimously to support the amendment. The council discussed the issue of disturbances caused by some of the homeless population downtown. Some of the councilors pointed out that most of the issues happen during the day when the homeless shelters are closed, leaving many homeless to wander downtown. In addition, the council pointed out that many of these disturbances happen right after lunch is served at organizations like Living Waters. The council asked City Manager Kevin Murphy to look into solutions to remedy the issues. Well, that's all I have for you today. Remember, you can watch the meetings in their entirety on LTC Channel 99 or on demand anytime at ltc.org. Thanks for watching and be swell.
On November 7th, Sobin Pen, publisher of the Khmer Post USA, interviewed 2 visiting Cambodians about the recent media shutdown in their country. The Hun Sen government has suspended the license for any American or Western-influenced radio station, as well as independent newspapers.
A number of the independent media have been shut down. For example, the My Radio program, the radio station who broadcast My Radio program, Free Asia and VOA, have been shut down.
Radio Free Asia, Radio Voice of America, and your station, Voice of Democracy, all have been shut down.
All have been shut down, but we're still running online.
So what you have now is only online?
That's only online, yeah.
Many of Cambodia's citizens live in rural areas without access to the internet. Government-run radio stations are still operating and can be heard in the far reaches of the country. Sobin's guests both believe that the media shutdown is simply because Prime Minister Hun Sen doesn't want to lose the upcoming 2018 election.
So Mr. Hun Sen, the Prime Minister, he always afraid of losing the next election based on the result of the local, the last June, this year's local election. He lost many seats at the local, and also the last national election in 2013, he lost 20 seats. So it's a big problem for him, but he always afraid about losing the power. So he need to try, to crack down like the opposition party and also independent media like that. Yeah.
I just want to add what Susan said. The goal of the ruling party led by Prime Minister Hun Sen is not to win the election, but to rule the country. So this means that whatever way that he doesn't care, he just thinks how to rule the country, how to grab the power. So that's why he has launched a series of the crackdown on any people that he thinks that have influence over the public.
Why do you think that he's doing that? That his policy is such anti-American at the.
He has been accused for many cases concerning the human rights violation. And at the same time, they have been criticized stronger from the Western, especially the American government and the American allies. One of the reasons that make his party lose a seat because of the independent media and the NGO. And more independent media and the NGO has been funded by the American funder and also from the American ally, like the European country. And that's why Hun Sen thought that America behind this movement.
As a youth movement leader for the opposition for 20 years, Hing Sok San is now being threatened with arrest for influencing the youth to turn away from Hun Sen and work for the opposition party.
I always, has some influence to the youth activists. That's why I'm now in danger, because 2 times already the government force tried to arrest me and also raided my home 2 times already, so that I'm escaped and arrived in the United States.
Both men believe economic sanctions against Cambodia might work to reestablish the radio broadcasts, but that it isn't likely until after the election in 2018. You can watch the entire interview program, Global Politics and Cambodia, on channels 8 and 95. Check LTC.org for showtimes. Football concussions have certainly been in the news recently because of the long-term effects of multiple head injuries, which can be quite severe. We went out into the fields at Colley Stadium to speak with Lowell High School Athletic Director Damon Amato. He explained what concussions are, how they are working to avoid them, and the protocol for dealing with them when they occur.
Concussion is a traumatic brain injury that happens from a blunt force trauma, and it, in layman's terms, kind of wiggles your brain around inside your skull and causes damage. The trauma from a concussion typically results in displaced neurological connections and also potentially bleeding on the brain. And that bleeding can cause swelling, which will cause impairment of certain neurological connections that cause different symptoms. The most common symptom for concussion is a headache. Almost everybody gets a headache typically from a concussion. Other than that, other common symptoms are dizziness, ringing in the ears, nausea, things like that. In total, throughout the year, I do see a lot of exposures because we have all the sports at Lowell High School. So I'd say I see between 25 and 40 concussions a year. We have a head injury policy passed through the school committee. The protocol is full rest, cognitively and physically. The biggest question I always get is how long am I out for? And unfortunately, that's the one question I can't answer because we don't know how long the symptoms of that concussion will last. Once their symptoms are completely gone for 24 hours, then we start the return to play protocol. And that starts with some mild physical activity, and we really try to increase their blood pressure to see if any of that activity brings those symptoms back. So if we can reproduce those symptoms, then we have to stop what we're doing there, and that's kind of our baseline to know that we can't progress them yet. See how he would get his head through, and his shoulder pad would be on the inside of where he's going. So that was the old way. A safe hit would be leading with your shoulder pad and not your head, with your eyes up front so that you can see where you're trying to tackle and getting on the near hip of your opponent. So if parents ask me whether football is safe, I tell them it's an individual decision. A lot has to do with how physical and how mature their athletes are, and how well they can take collision sport. Some kids who may not be as physically mature as others will have weaker neck strength especially, and that can predispose them to getting a concussion, or they may just be a lot smaller in stature than other players on the team, and when those two forces collide, obviously the bigger one wins. I don't typically see kids who worry about the risk very much For football, they love the game, and if they choose to play, then that's not really a deterrent for them. I personally feel that in the future we might see a little bit less tackle football, a little bit more flag football, especially for early on, and maybe tackle football will happen at the high school level only eventually. But that's, it's impossible to tell if that's going to happen.
We may see some changes in this all-American sport. The elections on November 7th created quite a buzz. It was clear early on that one issue dominated this election: the location of the high school. 7 of the 9 city councilors elected support the downtown location, along with 5 of the 6 who won school committee seats. On the non-binding referendum question, the vote was 7,254 to 4,629 in favor of the downtown location. The Colley Stadium option won in only one of the city's 33 precincts, and that was by only 9 votes. Vesna Noon was the top city councilor vote getter this year, knocking Rita Mercier off her long-held first-place spot. She came in 5th. Congratulations to all of the winners. For more election analysis, let's go to this week's Sunspot with Chris Scott and former State Senator Steve Panagiotakos.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Scott. Thank you for tuning into this week's edition of Sunspot. We're going to be talking politics today with a second appearance on Sunspot with Steve Panagiotakos. Steve, thanks for coming in. You helped me out of a pinch today.
That's okay.
Another guest that was scheduled kind of bailed, and I called you up, so I appreciate you coming in.
Pinch hitters are good.
Pinch hitters are good, and they're very valuable. Where do you want to start? For the 3rd Congressional District, or do you want to talk City Council and School Committee?
I think the city elections, because we're really, there's so much interest this year. The total vote went up from 10,500 to almost 14,000. I thought it was actually going to get closer to 15. Especially after the primary, because the primary almost doubled from the primary 2 years ago, the preliminary as we call it. So you could kind of see, after the preliminary, you could kind of see where, that was a big vote. That was almost 8,700 vote. People turned out, kind of see where the city was going.
Now, I know that between the preliminary election and the general election, you were crunching some numbers, and I tried to get you on record at one point to try to get some of that in the newspaper, but it seems that your number crunching really hit the nail on the head. And
well, how did you find out?
A little birdie landed on my desk, but a mutual friend. But
cool.
I guess your, the nexus of your number crunching was Belvedere would come out even stronger than it did in the prelim.
Yes.
And it came out to what, about 62%?
Yeah. I thought if it got to 60%, then the question was going to be overwhelmingly yes. What I was surprised at, quite frankly, was that the no's only won, I think, 4 precincts in the whole city.
Yeah, so
and they only won those by small margins, because I thought, Belvedere would be huge, 3-1, and it basically was, but I didn't know how it was going to react throughout the city. But you could tell by the campaign that was put on, by the yes on one on the question. They did a great job. So a lot of people, even though Belvedere came out, again, very high for the general, across the city they came out much better, but
that's what the yes people were hoping to show, that it wasn't just Belvedere, right?
And I think they did to an extent. I mean, the bottom line is, if you look at it, that extra vote that came out, everyone just kind of gave it to the no side or to the Colley side, right? And I was thinking to myself, they're doing such a good job. They're just not doing it in Belvedere. Their grassroots, their voter contact, all of that. So it's got to mean some votes elsewhere, and that was the case.
Let's talk about Belvedere just for a minute.
Sure.
So there was a lot of criticism of Belvedere leading up to the vote, from mostly the Colley side, saying that one neighborhood shouldn't decide the election. When Ward 1. Ward 2, no, what's Belvedere? Ward 1, Precinct 2 came in at the Shamrock Tuesday night. The numbers for the downtown council were just over the top, and if there was any doubt, that settled it. But I kind of look at it in a different way. I look at it that at least that neighborhood gets out to vote, right? Why don't other neighborhoods get out to vote? You can't criticize Belvedere for voting.
No, it's their right, and they exercise it. You know what I mean? And they, let's face it, they were going to be impacted more than anybody else. So you knew emotion and the motivation was there for them more than any else place out in the city. I live up in 8-3 up near the Daily School, and I could tell though that was a Cawley area, and it ended up being one, but they only won by like 40 or so votes. It wasn't a big win, you know what I mean? And I would have thought it was going to be more, you know. So that's what I'm saying. Even though Belvedere did get out, and they get out to a big number, that probably would have meant the decision on the question no matter what, you know what I mean? But the rest of the city came out too, and they stayed pretty much, in some of the places, the yes won pretty good actually, in certain areas. But in other
Across
areas,
the city.
Across the city. In other areas, it was smaller, and then there were the four precincts, 6-3, 5-1, 6-3, which are parts of Pawtuckettville. One side of Pawtucket, 5-1 is more near the Dracut line, Riverside Street, 6-3's up all the way to the Tingsboro line. Then 9-3, Christian, top of Christian Hill, and then 8-3 by the Daily School.
How much of the Belvedere vote do you think is a NIMBY vote as opposed to people who really feel that the high school belongs downtown where it's been for more than 100 years?
Well, I think no matter what, you're always going to have, I don't know if you can just say it's strictly NIMBY, but it's big. You know what I mean? Let's face it. You know, if you're going to have a 3,500 high school placed right in an existing neighborhood, there's going to be some adverse conditions or that you didn't deal with previously. Okay, so naturally there's going to be some NIMBY. I think there's a lot of people over there too that believe that either traditionally that it should be centrally located and it should stay downtown. But certainly the not in my backyard was there's definitely a motivation there. I mean, you can't ignore it. You can't say it isn't.
Steve, did you ever come out and indicate your preference on this matter?
No, my preference.
Do you feel? Oh, could you tell us
what
now?
my preference was?
Yeah.
In December, I spoke to some counselors and I said, "You need to put this on the ballot." And this was my reasoning. It wasn't even about the location yet, because that wasn't the issue yet. It was strictly the money. I mean, you're talking, you know, $350 million. You're talking about the largest capital expenditure in the history of Lowell, the largest school expenditure when it's done in the history in Massachusetts. It might be down the road, it would probably get, someone will go over it. But
I remember when Newton was the highest
exactly,
one years
but at
ago,
that time, and you also know that you got a good idea that even though it's at 350 or whatever the numbers are, they're going to go up a little bit here and there. So who knows where we end up? But that amount of money, especially the non-reimbursable, which is $150 or so million to the local taxpayer and could go up, that needs to be on the ballot. I mean, everybody's going to have to be paying that for 30 years.
Can you tell us how you voted on the ballot question? Do you care to share that?
Do I care to share it? I voted yes on the ballot question.
Okay. So you wanted to keep, I assume, keep the high school downtown?
I think at the end of the day, when you look at it, when you looked at everything, the one argument that really resonated with me on the Cawley side was that the disruption for students for those years during construction, and that meant a lot, because I remember I was at the Daily Junior High School when a lot of kids were going to AFCO for 9th grade.
Oh,
you know, we didn't have 9th grade. Junior high still went up to 9th grade. You know, so we didn't have the 9th. But you know, they were all coming from other parts of the city going there. You know what I mean? So it was. You could see there was a disruption to them. But that, you know, so as we were going forward, it became, to me though, keeping it downtown, I just thought was the fairest thing, in that we weren't disrupting an existing neighborhood. I really don't believe, you know, say we're going to put in Pawtuckettville, I just don't, I'd be tough to.
It would have been fought there too.
Right. It'd be tough for me to support that too. At the end of the day, I tried to stay out of it because really I thought the people should decide. And then when it got so divisive with regards to the question, you know, you kind of stood back and said, you know, they need to put this on the ballot because, you know, I remember the arena. The arena was a very divisive issue.
Not as divisive as this one.
No,
though.
because you didn't have social media back then.
True.
You know,
that's a whole other topic.
But again, it was only $4 million in some land.
Yeah.
You know, this is a lot more.
Money. Yeah.
You know, so there was a lot more at stake here. And you're dealing with children's education. But I really believe, I got friends on both sides, of course.
Of course you do.
Well intended. You know, I really do. I mean, the people really feel strongly about their position and well intended and want to do what's best for the city.
From a 30,000 feet viewpoint, right? How do you think it's been handled by the city administration and by the city council, by the school committee, the school administration? It seems that there was never really, to my point of view anyway, a meeting of the minds of city leaders to try to figure out a way to make this happen and at least attempt to keep everybody kind of moving forward and on the same page and keep everybody happy a little bit. It just seems that there wasn't that leadership.
Yeah, you know,
It seemed no one wanted to really take it.
yeah, I mean, but they were out there. I mean, people felt strongly on both sides. Look, from the administration standpoint, I think the city manager has done an unbelievable job in the city. There's been more economic development going on here in the last few years than we've seen in decades, and good economic development. You know,
I mean, just look at the courthouse. Yep.
And what's the courthouse? You look at the Maycomb expansion. You look at, you know what I mean? Just Kronos coming in, huge. You know what I mean? The Hamilton Canal project with Wind Development coming over. Sal's project over on Thorndike Street. You know, you can go on and there's others in the pipeline. So, you know, at the end of the day, Manager Murphy has done an unbelievable job leading the city. On this issue, I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a administration's issue. It really was more of a city council issue, and it had to be decided there. He was in a difficult situation. You have 5-4 vote in your city council, so the majority tells you where they wanted to go, what they want to do. So you got to go down that road.
So let me ask you a question.
And he did.
So those 4 candidates got reelected, and 3 of the 5 got booted.
Yes.
So what do you think that means in the corner office at City Hall moving forward, maybe perhaps into the first quarter of next year? Do you think City Manager Kevin Murphy has that job for as long as he wants, or do you think?
I'll tell you what, for the results he's shown this city in these last 3-4 years, since he's been there, we'd be lucky to have him stay, because he's done. Our city is on the move. When you can look around, it's on the move. This has been a difficult issue for a lot of people. I mean, you had families divided over this issue. You know what I mean?
So you're looking at it holistically, as have I.
Yeah.
But this issue has really taken a lot out of a lot of people. The high school issue.
It has, and hopefully, whatever the decisions are, you know, we can get back to a point where it's healed. I'm just happy the question wasn't 52-48 or 50. Right. I mean, you really do got a bit of a mandate.
I still think, though, that push the question aside, it was really the result on the city council that's going to set the course going forward, almost regardless of what happened with the question.
It's interesting on that because, you know, from 13 to 10, there was only 100 votes, roughly. You know what I mean? And there was only another 252 Karen Cirillo and Dave Conway, 8 and 9. So there was not a big margin from 13th to 8. You know what I'm saying? Not a huge margin. So, you know, it definitely, if that question didn't exist, you might not have seen many changes on the school committee.
We only have 2 minutes left. I want to ask you quickly about Vesna Noon.
Yes.
Vesna Noon lost a re-election bid, I think, two election cycles ago. Last year, the most recent election cycle, he tried to run but couldn't get on, and now he topped the ticket. What do you attribute that to? Is it just that he was for the downtown, or do you think there were some other issues there that he was able to capitalize on?
No, I mean, last time he was the first candidate, I think, in the history of Lowell that ever won 8 or 9 precincts and not got elected. Okay, 2 years ago, and that was the case. I mean, he would win 8-2 and then finish 14th and 8-3, the neighboring. You know, I mean, there just wasn't a rhyme or reason for it. So I think what he did is he certainly looked at those big voting precincts that he did very badly in and went in and campaigned for them. Certainly the being out front on the yes question helped him, especially in 1-2, 1-3. You know what I mean? And, you know, so
unfortunately, we only have a minute left. Do you think Dominic Lay kind of wrote his coattails on the school committee?
I don't think he wrote his coattails. I think he crafted his own.
Sakari Chow too.
I think Dominic Lay crafted his own way. You know, he did a good job, and he was able to get his name out there. And Sakari made a big move from the primary to the general.
Huge.
You know what I mean? So it shows he did a lot of work.
And he was pro-Collie.
Yeah, and he did a lot of work and almost pulled it off.
He did. Well, Steve, thanks for coming in on short notice. I appreciate it. I always enjoy talking to you.
You too.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Sunspot. We'll be back in a couple weeks with one more edition. Have a good night, everyone.
That's it for this edition of LTC News. You can find us on LTC channels 8 and 99, online at ltc.org, at LTC Lowell on Roku, or get the link each week on Facebook. I'm Alanna Flood. Thanks for joining us.